just want to mention something which was mentioned in the Balaturim last week. Beautiful insight. We find that the two categories of consecration of sacrifices. There's a category of sacrifices which they're primarily for atonement, for kapora, for instance, the sin offering, which we read about last week, the guilt offering, which is for specifically for atonement. It's a guilt offering. The ola, the burnt offering, also, although it could be brought voluntarily, its value has atonement value. Shlomim, the peace offering, the thanks offering, that is to secure our relationship with Hashem, from the word shalom. The Tod offering, if one is a beneficiary of something, of an unusual event, and he offers his thanks to Hashem, he brings a Toda, which is also a peace offering, except it's accompanied with 40 loaves of bread. Also, we have the mincha offering. The meal offering is classified as Kodesh Kadoshim. The offerings which are primarily for atonement and the meal offering can only be eaten by the Kohen, only by male Kohanim. It's a higher level of consecration. The shlomim, the peace offering, and the thanks offering, or similar to the Pesach, which is also has a status of a peace offering, could be eaten by ordinary Jews, men, women, as long as you're in a state of purity. And you eat it, it's eaten in Yerushalayim. The offerings of high level of consecration, if they're eaten by the Kohanim, they could only be eaten within the sanctuary. They cannot be taken outside of the sanctuary. If they're taken outside the sanctuary, they become invalidated. When you officiate, when you do the slaughtering of any of these animals, and you officiate, it has to be in the northern part of the sanctuary. In Hebrew, the word is tzafon. In Hebrew, tzafon is the north. The other classification of consecration, which is called kochim kalim, the word kal means it's a lesser level of consecration. When one officiates, it could be anywhere in the sanctuary. It does not be specifically the northern part of the sanctuary. But all the offerings that are specifically for atonement, or the older, the burnt offering, has to be done in the northern part, in the tzafon. As it says in the proportion, v'shachtu also yerach tzafon, on the side of the Mizbeach, which is the northern side of the Mizbeach. So over there's a Balaturim, and also Rabbeinu Bachya cites a verse from Yirmiyah, from Jeremiah, where Yirmiyah Hanavi says, "Mitzofon yiposach haro." From the north, the evil will be launched, meaning the first temple was destroyed, the first base of Mikdash by the Babylonians. Iraq is in the north of Israel. The enemy will come from the north to destroy the base of Mikdash. The north represents the enemy entering into the land to destroy the land. Now, why are we vulnerable to the attack of the enemy? Because there's prosecution, because there's spiritual failing. So to counter that, we bring the atonement offerings on the northern side of the Mizbeach to counter the invasion of the north. So the north of atonement is to address the weakness, the vulnerability which comes in from the north due to our own spiritual vulnerability because of our spiritual shortcomings. That's the understanding. Therefore, minatzofin tipos charo, the evil is going to come from the north. That's Rabbeinu Bachya, cites the verse in Yirmiyah, and the Balaturim. But the Balaturim adds two other things. He says, the word tzafun, for instance, during the Seder, one of the parts we have tzafun. You take the afikoman and you wrap it and you hide it. You put it away, conceal. The word safun means to be concealed. So he says you find the word safun in two instances. We know that the Akedah, the merit of the Akedah silences all prosecution against the Jewish people. And although Yitzchak himself was not slaughtered, the ram was brought in the place of Yitzchak, nevertheless, Hashem values the ash of the ram as if it would be the ash of Yitzchak himself. Why? Because if Avram wouldn't have been told to withdraw his hand from Yitzchak, he would have slaughtered Yitzchak and he would have sacrificed him. So it's referred to Afro shel Yitzchak tzafun lefonecha. The ash of Yitzchak is always concealed before you, is always hidden before you. So the word tzafun we find in regard to the Afro shel Yitzchak, the ash of Yitzchak, which is the ultimate atonement. Where else do we find the concept of tzafun? Although the word tzafun is not there, we find that Yaakov, when he was told to take the birthright, which was rightfully his by his mother, he said to his mother, "My brother's hairy, I am smooth-skinned. My father will touch me, who immediately will find out and realize that I'm not Esav, and rather than being a blessing, it'll be a curse." So Rivka says to Yaakov, "Olai kilos rabini, you have nothing to be concerned about. The curse will come upon me." And over there, the Targum says, the reason why I'm sending you is through prophecy. You're fully protected. You have nothing to worry about. It says, but nevertheless, she had to take the initiative. And it says she says to him, "Go to the flock and take shnei gedoy izim, take 2 goats, and I will prepare delicacies for your father." And what did she do with the goat skins? It says she covered his hands and his chest, so when Yitzchak will feel him, he'll feel as if he's hairy. So we find that Yaakov was concealed when he received the blessings from Yitzchak. And therefore, the Mishkan, we find that the Mishkan, part of the covering of the Mishkan, the covered sanctuary, was what? Was Ores Gedoy Izim. It was the skins of the goat skins to correspond to the goat skins that covered Yaakov's hands and chest. So we also find by Yaakov the concept of tzafun, hidden. He was hidden. And because he was hidden, and as a result of that, he was able to take the birthright, because without taking the birthright, without receiving those blessings, which is the material being provided for the Jewish people, as it says in Pirkei Avos, "Im ein kemach ein Torah." We're physical people. We have to be sustained materially, otherwise we couldn't survive. Therefore, Yaakov's taking the birthright secured the spirituality of the Jewish people till the end of time. In the merit of Yaakov's taking the birthright, there's a Klal Yisrael, there was a Sinai, and the divine presence dwells in our midst. In that merit, we have the Mishkan. Because the Midrash says, when Moshe Rabbeinu was told, "Osli migdash u'shchati b'socham," make for me a sanctuary, I will dwell in your midst, Moshe says to Hashem, "But how's it possible, you being infinite, to dwell in such a finite location?" So he says to Moshe, in the merit of Yaakov, who took the goat skins, who took the 2 goats, when his mother told him to take the goats, in his merit, I will dwell in the tent of goat's hides. So the Mishkan is in the merit of what? Of Yaakov Avinu, that the Shekhinah dwells in our midst, and Yaakov being the most special of the patriarchs. The Shekhinah in the Mishkan, Sinai was a public event. The Mishkan, the Shekhinah, the divine presence in our midst in the Mishkan is concealed. So just as Yaakov, when he went to take the blessings, which were rightfully his, he went in a concealed manner, therefore we merited that the Shekhinah is now amidst in a concealed location, in the tent of the goat hides. So again, the Mishkan, that's what counters. As we have Harabah min hatzafon. Evil comes from the north. That's vulnerabilities from the north. We counter it with what is safun. What ultimately silences the prosecution, which is only based on our spiritual deficiencies. It's the Efer shel Yitzchak tzafon lefonecha. The ash of Yitzchak, which is what? Which is concealed, which is hidden before you, Hashem. Why do we have that special standing in existence? Because the Shekhinah dwells in our midst, as it dwelled at Sinai in our midst. The Mishkan was a carryover of Sinai. The Beis Hamikdash was a carryover of the Mishkan. And whose merit is that? That the Shekhinah is concealed. We have in the Kodesh Kadoshim, the Holy of Holies. That is in the merit of Yaakov Avinu. That's Tzafun. Now, what's the concept of Tzafun? We find that, and we said this many times, that the Satan is given the ability to undermine certain spiritual opportunity, because nothing's ever perfect. And very often, Hashem brings about certain results by concealing things from Satan. Because if it would be something which is public knowledge and he's aware of it, he would undermine and not allow it to be. For instance, we find that we left Egypt, we left B'chipazon. The Jews gathered almost instantaneously. We have millions of people, and within moments, they gathered, they traveled, covered an area, a distance of 130 miles, to be ready to leave Egypt. When you ate the Korban Pesach, it was b'chipazon. It was hurried manner. Na'alechem b'raglechem, your shoes are on your feet, you're ready to go. You eat it b'chipazon, quickly. The Ramchal cites a Zohar. We read that when we left Egypt, we were memte shari tumah. We were at the lowest level of impurity at the point of spiritual extinction. And over the 49 period to Sinai, every day we advanced one level. But when we left Egypt, being at the 49th level, Satan did not believe that to be able to escape. Evil was actually, we were entombed in evil. Hashem did something miraculous at that moment. And this is not explicit, this is based on the Zohar. He elevated us from the lowest level to the 49th level of Tara, of purity, immediately. On the first day we left Egypt, we went from the lowest level and we were launched to the highest level. We soared to the highest level. And only because we brought suddenly to that level were we able to be released from those spiritual shackles of impurity. After we left, once we were out of the reach of the Egyptians, which represented evil, then we reverted back to the lowest level, and every day we advanced another level of purity. So again, it had to be done instantaneously, because Satan would have realized that we were going to leave. Only due to that, he wouldn't have allowed it to happen. We find that Tamar, the daughter of Yehuda, who ultimately is the mother of Mashiach ben David. The Davidic line comes from that union between Yehuda and Tamar. Yehuda's kingship. And in what context does it present itself? He's traveling and he notices a woman, he thinks she's a prostitute, and he engages with her. And then she conceives twins. One of the twins, Peretz, is ultimately the father. He's the antecedent of the Davidic line. That's Malchus Beis David. When will evil come to an end? After Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, evil will be purged from this existence. Satan will be destroyed. If Satan would have been aware what was going on, he wouldn't have allowed it. But because it was in the context of something which was tainted, was impurity, he himself, that he was hoodwinked by that, and he allowed it to go through. If it would have been done in a formal, pure setting, he wouldn't have allowed it. He would have somehow disrupted it. The story of Boaz and Rus. Rus is the mother of David HaMelech, grandmother of David HaMelech. What's the background of the story? Rus goes out to the field during the harvest season. Boaz is there, and she was advised by mother-in-law Naomi to dress in the finest and to present herself to Boaz. And it says Boaz nearly couldn't control himself. He nearly cohabited in the field with her. Boaz is the leading sage of the Jewish people. Could you imagine the Chafetz Chaim? The Chafetz Chaim was endlessly less than Boaz, because that was the only setting that was possible to bring about that reality. And Satan would not interfere, because we hooked the big one this time. Boaz, Yehuda, the patriarch of kingship, of the Davidic line. In that tainted setting, even Satan is actually, because of his so-called conflict of interest, seeing this, he allows it through. Things have to remain concealed. You have to keep things under wrap. Because if things will be public, Satan immediately tampers with it, and he topples the apple cart. The evil comes minat sofo. Suddenly, we're confronted with our vulnerability. We have the tzafon of all the offerings, the sacrifices of atonement in the northern part of the sanctuary. To counter that, it's interesting, by the Akedah, Yishmael and Eliezer with Avram Avinu. When Avram went to do the Akedah, what did he tell Eliezer and Yishmael? You remain here, we will return. They had no idea what was happening. Everything was secret, it was secretive. And only when they came back, did they know immediately? I don't know. But factually speaking, at that moment, at the time of Akedah, the only one who was there was Avram and Yitzchak. And the angel calls out, withdraw your hand from the lad. Everything had to be in concealment. The Akedah. And we find on the way to the Akedah, what happened? Satan, in the worst way, tried to interfere, not allow Avram Avinu to go to the Akedah. He came as a raging river. And Avram had to be Mispalel to Hashem, Bo Ma'im Ad Nofesh. Here I want to do your will, I'm drowning. Only at that moment did the river cease to flow. So Satan, knowing what may have happened, what was exactly how he didn't know, he tried to interfere and not allow it to happen. Anything of monumental greatness, spiritually speaking, he tries to interfere. I'll give you an example. The whole generation passed away over 40 years. We're about to go in to the promised land. What happens? You know what happens? The story of the Baal Peor. The Baal Peor was that most special generation, the new ones, the ones who hadn't sinned with the Meraglim. There's the Baal Peor. And then there's the story right afterwards where the Jews start complaining about this wafer-like food that they've been eating all these years, and they're going to die from it. And Hashem sends the vipers to bite them. Why? They have 1 foot outside of Eretz Yisrael. They're about to go in. All of a sudden, the most serious attacks on our spirituality take place, not allow it to happen. It's not happening. Satan doesn't want it to happen. The Baal Peor, which if not for Pinchas's zealotry, we would have been destroyed as a Jewish people. And then the Mon, you'd say, after all you've seen, you learn, Satan is able to hoodwink you. And it's interesting, the Baal HaTurim says in last week's reading, we have the Mincha. Mincha is made of matzah. You cannot have sour, and you can have anything sweet. Any sweet ingredient. So he says, why? So he says, sour, as the Gemara tells us, the evil inclination is the yeast in the dough. That activates us, activates our desires. And why dvash? The dvash nectar of the date is the sweetest nectar, Because when the Yetzer Hara presents itself to us, it's as sweet as honey. He presents it in a way, there's no menu which is attractive and as sweet as that. And because the mincha represents matzah, which is everything but that, therefore sorah, it cannot be chometz, and it cannot have yeast, and it cannot have any sweet ingredient, because that's a representation of the Yetzer Hara. He presents things in the most attractive light that we're convinced not only is it permitted, it's maybe even a mitzvah to do. Therefore, whenever we speak about spirituality, everything is safun, is hidden, and that's the north, whether it's the ashes of Yitzchak or it's Yaakov going to take the blessings, it's a concealed manner, and therefore we merited to have the Shekhinah in the tent which was covered with the gold tides.